Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Talent Talks, another great edition. And this is my favorite kind of edition because I actually, sometimes we talk with publishers and software and products in the industry, but my favorite is always when we get to talk to heads of talent acquisition. So today with me, I have Adi from Informatica on the line. Adi, would you mind telling the listeners of Talent Talks just a little bit about you and what you do for talent acquisition in India?
Hi, thank you very much for having me. I'm Aditya. I head talent acquisition for Informatica in India. We predominantly hire a lot of technical R&D folks in India, and the span is huge, and we hire across India. So, looking at all the rising talent and new age technology, and cloud being the cutting edge area which everybody wants to be in today. So, we are in that space right now as we speak.
Excellent. And for the listeners and viewers that have not heard of Informatica, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. Informatica is a leader in enterprise cloud data management. What do? We empower progressive companies to realize their potential on being data driven. And what we do is through our culture, which is basically we data, which means committing to cultivate value driven emphasis on business success. Then we act as a great initiator of acting as one team. We think customer first. We always invest in future technology. That's why we are in data, because we know data. There's a big saying, right? For everything else, we believe in God. For everything else, bring data. So we are in a data economy as we speak. So these are critical areas, and we are the one of the leaders in enterprise cloud data management.
It's interesting that you say that, right? Like data is everything. As a talent acquisition leader, I think early on in the cycle of talent acquisition, it was sort of like a feely kind of job, right? Like I feel like this person might be good to work here. But really, data drives most decisions. And the more we become data driven, the better decisions we make. And so, with the kinds of positions that you're hiring, it really, I'm sure that it has changed not only over time, but also with COVID. Can you give me a little bit of insight into not only what's happening from a job seeker perspective, but also as an employer? Like, how have you seen things change over the last year, pre and post COVID?
Yeah, so I started working when we used to hire, and I used to use box files to hire folks. So move from paper to internet. Yes, the whole landscape is changing, and I think so. COVID has pushed us in a way of adapting to technology. There's a very interesting article on something called Martek's law, which basically talks about the adoption of the technology moving at a faster pace than the adoption from organizations. So there are a lot of things which have moved, which is you look at the tools. All organizations have progressively looked at tools which are more effective, more agile as we speak. Organizations spending a lot of both sides, from a candidate and from an organization perspective. You have people moving onto the social platform. LinkedIn is a good example where both it's like a marketplace where you have both the candidate and the employer being on the same place. Networking has taken a new step where people are connecting through virtual webinars now, and also through physical meetups, which are playing an important part. Virtual interviews is I think so the thing which the direction a lot of companies are moving into, where assessment will become far more critical as we speak. Art of social selling is becoming far more and more. I always believe that the recruiter is a salesperson. I always believe in that fact. And the online brand. We spoke about data. All decisions have to be data driven. It just can't be look, feel, and experience as we speak. And mobile, right? We are in an era where the Gen Z has just walked in, right? When they were growing up, they already had mobile. So
Mhm.
mobile friendly environment is very critical for any organization as we speak.
Okay, so you said a lot there. I'm going to unpack a few things, right? So the first thing that really struck a chord with me is how video interviews and just generally computer things, virtual conferences, those sorts of things are becoming more of the norm. And a lot of high volume companies that hired maybe some entry level positions in mass, they maybe did some of those video interviewing and that sort of thing before. But now with COVID and locations being shut down and sort of not wanting to travel, I think that that's become really much more mainstream. Are you seeing that even in more of your technical positions that you hire for?
Yeah, so it's becoming more, candidate spread has gone higher because somewhere I always foresee that we'll get into a location agnostic jobs. I hope we do, because then your talent spread becomes really big. Virtual, you're right. The way the direction is going, a lot of virtual interviewing is happening, and a lot of companies are investing in the right virtual tool, which will make sure that it negates the face-to-face part completely, right? Where you don't miss it, as simple as that. And also, I think so. A lot of companies are training their interviewers how to interview on a virtual, platform, because a lot of them are not aware. A lot of the interviews earlier, which used to happen, was always one way, right? The candidate was online, you weren't online, right? Or your video wasn't on. Right now, it has to be both ways, right? It's a big learning. I think so. People are moving in that direction as we speak, and people will move to further more adoption of technology as we speak. Uh, you know.
And I think that's true with assessment too, right? Like I can remember when I started at AT&T, I don't know, I'm going to give my age away, but 20 something years ago, I remember standing in front of a group of candidates and asking them to fill out a Scantron sheet, right? Like, I mean, like we had them fill out little bubbles and then we went and ran the bubbles through the machine. So that's come a long way, as has virtual interviewing. Even just a few years ago, I can remember hiring managers saying to me, "What system do I need to log into for my virtual interview?" And now, there's still some of that, but mostly it's sort of like the phone. You just ask the candidate, "Should I call you on your mobile or something else?" And now you just ask them, "Hey, can you do a meets or something else?" So I
Yeah.
think it's almost becoming a method of interaction as opposed to a product or a software, which I think is good for us in the industry as a whole. You said something else that I thought was interesting, and that is that candidates and hiring managers are sort of I maybe am reading a little into this, so tell me if I'm wrong, but candidates and hiring managers are going away from sort of the one-off things because there's really only the option today of meeting virtually, right? Do you feel like that's good or bad for recruiting?
No, I think so. It's good because one, there's always a struggle in adoption, right? We spoke about it earlier. Adoption was always, hey, do you have the budget? But now, since you're forced into it, you're making the right move for making sure that you're adopting to technology and for the right reasons, right? You are taking those steps of making sure that environment is right. Secondly, is I think what is helping us is the candidate drop ratio for interviews and availability is now far more higher as compared to what it was earlier. So that's really moved the needle in the right direction where we need to be. I think that's really helping us from an
Yeah,
organization perspective.
and that impacts everything that happens before it too, right? Which is sort of where we cross over. We cross over in the sourcing space, right? And so because more people are showing up for interviews and they're really working their way through the process, is that having any impact on your sourcing costs? Or are you needing to maybe source less because you don't have such a drop off? Or how is that impacting your front end costs?
Yeah, so cost to serve obviously is dropping. Look at from a cost from a advertisement perspective, right? Everything is free. You use any of the sites where it's the main game. I always feel is you should know where the talent lies and then have the right approach. You can't just go all over and speak about it. So your cost on obviously on the agency. I think so. You should use agency predominantly for the key skills which you need to hire, those critical architects. I always believe your cost on advertisement has come down because everybody's on social media, and how do you leverage your own set of employees on social media. It also helps you from an organization perspective. The cost on software might go up for organization because they will realize that they would want to use some of the right assessment tools as we go forward, to making sure that you have the right tools. I've interestingly attended few career fairs which are virtual, and new age technologies coming through. Those are very interesting ones. Travel cost has gone down. Your By virtue of people not traveling, it's really come down. I think the people in campus would be breathing, but I'm sure the interviewer wouldn't be happy because he or she would have gone to exotic places for interviewing, right? So yeah, and investment on hackathons, right? A lot of companies are doing that. I think so. That's one of the right way of tapping your passive talent, which won't otherwise come to you.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because as I do these talent talks and we talk about what's going on with COVID and the lack of travel and the lack of events in college campuses, it seems that a lot of our listeners are really, I don't want to say struggling, but it's new to them, right? Like, how do you do a virtual hackathon? How do you connect with the universities if you're not going on campus? And I also think that for many of us, travel was a way of life to go see candidates, right? I mean, like, I have to tell you, I don't think that since I've been married, I've spent more time in the same house with my husband as I have since COVID started. So
Yeah, so.
I think we're all feeling it a little bit, right? A little stir crazy. So eventually this is sort of what the situation that we're in now, and the travel and all of the virtual things. Eventually they won't be as much of a necessity. But I predict they're still going to be our reality, right? We as businesses we have observed such a savings both in the time of our people and the cost of our gallivanting, right? That some of that is eventually going to stay around. So that's my opinion, right? Like, from your perspective, Adi, what does the future of work look like?
Future of work is, I have been speaking on this topic for some time. I always call it the triple W: your workplace, your work, and the workforce. All three will get impacted. People will just opt out. Your workforce will become far more virtual. You will have gig, which will kick through more. And also, people will have flexibility of choosing their own assets. Bring your own asset to the workplace. People, the longer career spans, people will have longer career spans because they wouldn't want to retire faster by virtue of cost of living going up. So you will see that issue coming up more extensively. You will have more people moving to larger cities, right? You will have those bigger cities, people working, maybe staying in suburbs, moving in that direction. Impact on some of the developing countries to develop, like example, Japan will always have an issue of aging population. So somewhere down the line, they need to look at immigration being far more flexible, right? As compared to Africa, where you will have more push out because of infrastructure, right? And then climate plays a very, very important part as we speak, because it needs to be in the right direction. Thanks to COVID, I think so. It's helping us, and obviously gig. I feel gig economy will be gig workforce will come into play extensively. We just need to see the learnings from COVID of making sure that some of the things like insurance and few other things are borne by the employer as we speak. So a lot of interesting things as we speak go further up.
So I feel like you are validating a crystal ball that I had about 15 years ago. So about 15 years ago, a very large group of AT&T executives, we all sat down together and we made this, what does Workforce 2020 look like, right? And it really, I mean, you're hitting on all of the key factors there, right? I think it's a good thing that some of the boomers or our older generation are going to delay retirement. When the
Yeah,
economy recovers, I mean, that's really going to be helpful to keep sort of that
yeah.
institutional knowledge, right?
And
Uh,
retirement also, I feel a lot of companies should look at phased retirement of saying that, hey, you don't want to work for 8 hours, maybe just work for 4 hours. And because you don't lose the talent, right, for that period of time, then person is gainfully engaged. So
Yeah, and if you layer on top of that sort of this non-location based, global workforce. So whereas, even as little as 10 months ago, you were really struggling to find that developer in Silicon Valley or wherever that was. Now it's like you can find that person anywhere in the world. And as long as the hours work, you really aren't out anything. So I think it brings a lot of opportunity. And I'm a big fan. Like AT&T was a really big company, right? And the whole gig economy thing was a little scary because we had lots of employees, right? And how do you make that shift? But I think that as you really start to think about making the most of your talent, no matter where they want to be and where you in doing what you need, I think that that becomes sort of like an easy answer, right? It's pretty low risk. I
right.
I think you're spot on, and I appreciate that. 15 years ago, I think it was more like 12, but I think more like 12 years ago, I wasn't totally off base, right? Like, because at the time it seemed a little crazy to say things like that. So, so let's transition into one of my favorite areas, which is quite honestly why I'm at Joveo, and that's talent acquisition technology. So, what investments have you made or are you considering making to cope with some of these global changes that you foresee coming?
Yeah, so we've obviously invested in a good 8 years. I think that's the basis for a lot of organizations. You need a tool which is far more responsible, both from the hiring manager and from a candidate perspective. We've invested in the right interviewing tool and the asset. Assessment tool plays a very important part, specifically for critical roles where you want to assess the individual on some of those skills. I think that's coming through. We're looking at in future also looking at how do you have chatbots, also looking at self scheduling, and obviously main aim is to make sure how do you tap the passive talent pool, which is looking at market intelligence. How do you make sure that you hit the hit the iron when it's hot, predominantly looking at the right place to get the organizations to tap that talent. um, but if you look at aspirationally, but not from our organization, you know, what organizations, whichever whom I've been speaking to, are looking at tools which will engage with candidate, which will hire for potential, which will look at
Yeah.
and market intelligence, more external facing, more data driven. We spoke about that, and recruiting will become. I always feel. Not recruiting, actually people should, it's talent acquisition, right? There's a difference between, people still don't understand. Talent acquisition will become the advisory role. I always feel that that's the role, talent acquisition, because it's like a sales and a marketing function, right? You basically are the forefront and you add to the organization, right? So these are some of the areas which I feel talent acquisition will extensively grow further up.
I love that, and thank you. This is really interesting, and I love your perspective. I, there's too much for us to unpack during a single talent talk. So if you're game, I'm going to have you back. Maybe I'll have you back with somebody else too. That would be awesome. But
Yeah.
I think you're spot on, right? Both from where talent acquisition has come from and where it's going, where our gaps are, what our opportunities are, and also I I have to have you back because I hate chatbots, and we have to have a whole conversation about that, right? Like we have to have like chatbots are the bane of my existence. So we'll have to have you back just to talk about that and a few other things. But so I really appreciate your time and perspective today. I really would love to have you back on another episode. I think that your insight and also your perspective on past and future, like how things are moving, I think it's spot on. And I would love to just unpack that more in a future episode. So for all of our viewers out there, stay tuned and keep your eyes out because that will definitely happen. And Audie, it has been one of the most entertaining and informative 20 minutes that I've had in the last few weeks. I think that you're just spot on where you're at. And I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. Thanks so
Thank you.
much. Bye bye.
Goodbye.